So, since Acts chapter 1, we've covered about 20 years. Since Acts chapter 21, now we're in 23, we've covered about 2 or 3 days. All right, so we are zooming in and slowing down dramatically of what's being covered. So, by the time he got to Jerusalem and decided to observe the ending of a vow with his other brothers, and a week has gone by. It's when he is seen at the temple, accused of defiling it by bringing a Gentile in, and the mob commences to beat him to death. And then the Roman captain, who is very, very close on sight, rushes out and snatches him up, puts him in chains, and then starts trying to ask questions of the mob. He can't get good answers, so he takes him into the castle, and he's asked permission on the step. Can I please speak to the people? And he's given permission, and they allow him to speak right up until the time that he says that Jesus had sent him into the Gentiles, and then they go stark raving mad again. He's brought into the castle, and they are going to examine him. This is not good cop, bad cop. This is bad cop and bad cop. They were going to beat him and whip him until he told him why everyone was so upset at him. And he politely mentioned to him that, is it lawful to take such an action against a Roman citizen? And the answer to that is no. So as soon as they found out that he was a Roman citizen, they canceled that plan. And the captain made plans for the next day to get Paul in front of the council, these Jewish leaders, also called the Sanhedrin, to make sure that, in order so that he could understand what is going on. Why are these people wanting to kill him? What has he done? He don't understand it. And so obviously the mob is not the time to ask. It wasn't getting there. He didn't have the ability to examine through physical coercion. And so he's trying a more polite approach. So, on the morrow, because he would have known with a certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews, he being the chief captain, the one accused being Paul, he loosed him from his bands and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Pilate down and set him before them. So, you're on your next day there. Paul is probably funny different colors of black and blue, because they were commencing to kill him before the Romans got there. So he is battered and bruised and spent a night under arrest. And so he has now appeared before all the religious leaders, right? High priests and his council. And that's where we pick up in chapter 23. Paul, earnestly beholding the council, looking at him seriously. Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. That's a pretty blanket statement of, I didn't do anything wrong. He had, if you look at his past, he had served God as zealously as he knew how until Jesus struck him down, and then he realized he was in error, and he served him with better knowledge from then on. But the high priest there did not like that response. He thought it was inappropriate. And so he commanded somebody that was standing closer to the prisoner than he was to punch him in the face. Right? Smite him in the mouth. It could have been a slap. Either way. All he said was, I've lived with a good conscience before God until this day. High priest says, hit him. Whack! Then Paul said unto him, the high priest, God shall smite thee, thou whited wall. For sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law? A whited wall. This is an allusion to being a hypocrite. All right, you're supposed to be sitting as a judge of all the standards of the law, high priest. He didn't know he was a high priest, but whoever here in this council. And what you just did, order me to be punished when I have not condemned the law and there hasn't been a judgment given, was contrary to the law. So he says, the Lord will smite thee. The Lord will deal with it. He's not saying, I'm going to get you. The Lord shall smite thee. All right. That makes sense? Now, that's a pretty sharp response. Granted, it could have been worse, but he'd been punched in the face. And they that stood by says, revilest thou God's high priest? You just spoke disrespectfully to the high priest. Now, at this time, the high priest, unlike how God set it up, where originally with Aaron, it was for his life, and then upon his death, it passed to his son, and so on. By this time, high priests are coming and going. And I believe at this time, the Romans had a say in who was going to be appointed. So Paul's been out of town a while, and he does not recognize that the person who just ordered him to be struck is actually currently the high priest. So when they say, you're going to speak that way to the high priest, he answers humbly, I wist not. Wist, old school word, means I didn't know. I knew not. I knew not, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. Basically, if I'd known he was the high priest, I would have complied because the law says not to speak evil of the rulers. So at this time, Paul, again, earnestly beholding this council, has recognized, I guess from their dress or how they're gathering, I don't know exactly, but that there was two different groups in the room. He perceived that one part was the Sadducees, and the other Pharisees. He was raised a Pharisee. And so this is where we will learn from Luke the distinction between those two groups. There's a lot of secular history you could try to go to, but you don't need really any more than Scripture, and so this is what Scripture teaches. So there are these two groups, Sadducees and Pharisees. So he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Of the hope and resurrection of the dead am I called in question. So he is pleading his affiliation with the Pharisees and acknowledging that he's not an upstart. His father was a Pharisee. This is something in the family tradition, which would go a long way with his audience here. And he is saying that what we believe as Pharisees, that we have this hope that there is a resurrection from the dead. He says, that's why I'm here. That is what I'm being called into question about. And when he had said so, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So just like you've got tribal politics today, right? If somebody claims to be on your team and they're not on the other team and somebody's picking on them, well, no, you can't do that. He's on our team. Or however it shakes out. So the Pharisees, they start, with the Sadducees, they start arguing. The multitude is now divided. All right? They had been united in purpose against him. Now they're divided amongst themselves. And then Luke gives the explanation. The Sadducees say there is no resurrection. Right? They don't believe that it exists. There's no resurrection of the dead. Neither are there angels. Neither spirit. But the Pharisee confess both. So, radical different understanding of Scripture. They were both Jews, but one did not believe that after death there'd be any form of resurrection, and the same group didn't believe in angels. And so, how they dealt with all the Scriptures that talked about angels coming to interact with people, or the angel of the Lord sending before the people of Israel in the flame of fire as they're going out of... I don't know how the Sadducees explained all that away. It's probably not too hard when you think about how many nominal Christians today will doubt, well, God didn't really make the world like it says in Genesis. Or the Bible, it's got good stories or good morals, but it's not real, right? This kind of, we'll take a portion of it, but not all of it. Certainly not the parts we don't like. And so you can see that's similar to what's going on here. So of the two, the Pharisees were closer to the text. And so they get up in arms because they feel like one of theirs is being attacked for something they believe in. And so they start taking his part. There arose a great cry, and the scribes that were of the Pharisees' part arose and strove. So they're arguing. We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel hath spoken to him, let us not fight against God. And so they acknowledge that God could speak to individuals through visions, through a spirit, something the Sadducees obviously did not. And so that is something that Paul had said on the steps yesterday, that he had had a vision where someone had come and spoken to him and later spoke to him again. Something the Sadducees listened to that tale would have gone, yeah, right. The Pharisees, there's more along the lines of their theology. So let us not fight against God. So they were willing to be on his side a little bit. Now, it didn't go farther than this, because if you start getting specifics into what that vision said, and you start talking about Jesus specifically being the Christ, they probably would have been united again against him. But at least as far as this point, the way he's framed it, I'm here because I have a hope of the resurrection of the dead, which he did. And his hope specifically is in a person, but that we would all have that resurrection because of that person. All right. So there arose a great dissension. So these, religious men commenced to caterwauling. They're fighting. Not necessarily blows, but they are grappling with each other in such a way that the Roman soldier, who don't know what the heck any of these guys are talking about, he's afraid his prisoner is going to be ripped apart, pulled in two. So it had to have been more than just a shouting match. All right, so this is, again, very visceral and physically tumultuous in the council chamber. This is getting rowdy. And so, fearing that Paul should have been pulled in pieces of them, commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force from among them. So you've got this little mini mob riot thing going on. The soldiers have to go in and snatch him out because he doesn't want his prisoner to be damaged.
So is this happening in the temple?
I don't think it's necessarily in the temple. I think this is some portion of where the council would have gathered. I don't know if that's in the temple itself.
But it's not in the council where it was yesterday.
No. Yeah. He brought them forth into their council, is how it describes it in the end of his letter. Now, that's the captain posing things, and he has a colorful way of phrasing his letter when he sends them down south or north to Caesarea. But wherever their council met, I don't believe that would have been. It may have been near the temple, but not in the portion reserved for the Jews, certainly, because you've got soldiers right there too.
Which Ananias is this? How does it say in verse 2? And the high priest Ananias. Commanded to smite him on the mouth.
This would not be the same Ananias from Jesus's, because that was 20 years ago, and you've had multiple priests since then. Whether they're kindred or not, I don't know. Josephus would probably be a good reference for trying to track through the different high priests if you're really curious. But all I know is you got a 20-year gap there. All right. So he takes him back to the castle. So our poor captain of the guard here, he still doesn't know what this guy's done. What am I supposed to do? This is a conundrum here. So that night, he's spending his next night in jail. Again, still bruised and battered, and probably got a few more fresh injuries from this last scene. The Lord comes and stands by him. The night following, the Lord stood by him. So this was not just a bright light, right? This is Jesus coming and appearing in a way that he was standing beside Paul in prison and said, "Be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome." Now, do you remember where Paul had planned on going before he made this trip back to Jerusalem? Rome, yeah. When he left, he was going to make his trip to Jerusalem, and the next stop was going to be Rome. That was way back when he was at Ephesus and he was departing with the silver riot. He'd already made that plan. So, Jesus is telling me, cheer up. You're going to live. They're not going to kill you here in Jerusalem because I've got a reservation for you in Rome. All right? Be of good cheer. When it was day, all right, so your next day, it's the day after he's had 2 nights in the clink, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And they were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy. That's wild. I mean, we read that, we've heard about that, and you're just kind of, okay, yeah. Can you imagine ticking off 40 people in the town that you grew up so bad that we're not going to eat a mouthful of food or drink anything until you're dead? I mean, I'd be a little nervous going down to the Waffle House if someone said that here in town. I mean, that's 40 folks is not small. That's hard to, I'm being kind of flippant here, but this is trying to get you to think. This is a big deal. Right? They are seriously upset. And what has he really done? He's preached the truth that Jesus is the Christ. That's it. Now, he's been slandered and accused of some other things, but at the core message, he's teaching Jesus is the Son of God. He came, he died, and he arose, and he reigns today, and he's coming back. And that is so offensive, so awful, so terrible thing for him to say. And I was sent to the Gentiles too to tell them about it, that these 40 Jews have, made a curse that, we're not going to eat or drink until he's dead. And they got a bunch of them.
Follow through with that.
I do not think they followed through with that because their way was thwarted. But you could see the urgency that they had, right? This was, we're going to kill him. We're going to kill him today, tomorrow if we have to, 3rd day certainly. But with each passing day, there's a greater urgency to fulfill this because we're hungry. So these guys have made their conspiracy. They then go to the chief priests and the elders, right? These are the ones that he met with yesterday. And the 40 say, "We've bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now, here's how you're going to help us out. Now, therefore, ye with the council," take your authority and the way that they know who you are, "you signify to the chief captain that he bring him down to you tomorrow." All right, so they're at least going to go that 24 hours without eating. "Tomorrow, bring him down as though you would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him." So he's in the castle, he's under guard, he's in safe. You as the council say, "Bring him down here to us. We've got some more questions. And we'll take care of it." Because of that little bit of travel time between the castle and wherever that council chamber is, we're going to get him. Et tu, Brute, right? All right. Now, the Lord being the sovereign God of the universe who just promised Paul that he was going to Rome, arranged for this conversation to be overheard by Paul's nephew. Paul has a sister. We don't know her name. Sister, Paul's sister. I don't know. And she had a son. And he heard of their lying in wait. He'd heard their plan. He heard that what they were going to do. So he went and entered into the castle and told Paul, the boy was allowed to go into the castle and he was allowed to see the prisoner. Right, Lord opened the doors. Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him." 2, the centurion didn't go, I ain't got time for this. He took and went to the chief captain, brought the boy, and said, Paul the prisoner, the one you're kind of already in trouble with because you wrongfully bound him. Remember that? He was already upset about that. The Paul the prisoner called unto me and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee. All right, so you just remember, he's already messed up a little bit with Paul. And now this Roman citizen is asking him to listen to this boy. And so he yields. He says, I got something for you. I don't know what the message is. So the chief captain took him by the hand, took the young boy, and went with him aside privately, and asked him, what is it thou hast to tell me? All right, so again, he's taking the time. The Lord's opening up the doors for this. And he said, so this is the nephew, the Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldest bring Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. But do not thou yield unto them, for there lie in wait of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath, that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, looking for a promise from thee. Whose fault's it going to be? The chief captain, is the way it's been framed here, is that they're going to ask you, and they're just waiting for a promise from you, and then they're going to kill them. So the chief captain heard, and he believed him. Right? And talk about the significance of Pharaoh believing Joseph's interpretation of the dream. Right? Well, he believed him. So the chief captain let the young man depart and charged him before he left. He says, see that thou tell no man that thou hast shown me these things. Right? Don't say anything to anybody. All right? He's got to make his counter plan. All right? So he called unto him 2 centurions. All right? The word century means 100, right? 100 years, century. Centurions, I don't know if it's exactly 100, but these guys are over about 100 soldiers. So he calls 2 of them. He says, make ready 200 soldiers. Okay, that makes sense for the 2 of them. To go to Caesarea. If you look on your map, Caesarea is a port city. It's to the north in Samaria. Probably take a couple days to get there. Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70. See, I'll keep track. We got 200 soldiers plus another 70 horsemen, and then spearmen 200. All right, so you got 200 with long spears, 70 horses, another 200 infantry. You got a band of 470, nearly 500 men, because he's been warned there's a danger of 40 men trying to kill one guy. So he's got 10-to-1 odds on protection and deterrent. And provide them beasts that they may set Paul on and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. So these 2 centurions have been ordered to take all this mass, put Paul on an animal, probably put him in the middle of all of it, and get him to my boss, to the governor, and get him out of this town. This town is dangerous. Right? They are trying to kill him, and if we leave him here, there'll be too many opportunities, so get him down to Caesarea. What's the governor's name? Felix. Is that the cat? No, not Felix the cat. Felix the governor, Roman governor. And then he wrote a letter to go with the prisoner. And you got to listen to the detail of this letter, because, I mean, this was sugar-coated. This was painting a lens so he didn't look like he was in a bad light. All right, he's writing to his boss. See, what had happened was, and he's getting the first crack at telling Felix. So he says, Claudius Lysias, that's him, unto the most excellent governor Felix, sendeth greetings. So a third way of saying hello. This man was taken of the Jews, and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army, and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. Now, when did he learn that he was a Roman? After he'd already snatched him, bound him, and took him into prison, was getting ready to, whoop him, scourge him. But instead he said, well, I knew he was a Roman, and so I rescued him from their hands. And when I would have known the cause wherefore they accused him, I brought him forth into his council. He doesn't say, I couldn't understand why they were trying to beat him that day, so I had to try again. I was going about the matter, trying to inquire, investigate what's going on. I took them to their council, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, right? The Jewish law, as opposed to the Roman law. He didn't murder anybody or do anything salacious, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or bond. So he understood Roman law, and that he hadn't heard anything in that council that would justify him being either arrested or put in to death. So he's kind of framing it as if he hadn't arrested him, right? It's still a rescue mission. And when it was told me that the Jews laid wait for the man, shorthand for kill him, I sent straightway to thee, and gave commandment to his accusers also to say before thee what they had against him. Farewell. I am passing you the ball. I'm passing the baton. I'm putting them in your capable hands, and I'm going to send them to you out of this area where people are laying in wait, so you can figure out what's going on. All right? I think it's a hilarious letter. All right. So the soldiers, they did as they were commanded. They took Paul, and they brought him by night to Antipatris. Excuse me, can't see that. Antipatris. Oh, I missed the spot. You're going to take all those soldiers, and you're going to leave tonight at the 3rd hour of the night. So if the sun goes down, you wait 3 hours, then go. So they're not waiting to give the conspirators time to figure out what's going on. We are leaving tonight. We're leaving under cover of darkness. You take this, military movement of 500 men, and y'all start hiking. And so they made it about halfway, which is where this city is. And then in the morning, they left the horsemen to go with Paul, and the other soldiers returned back. So now he's got an escort of 70 horses, along with whatever beast he's riding on, and the other spearmen and infantry can go back to the castle. They're past the immediate danger, because, the 40 are right there in Jerusalem. So if you can get out of that perimeter, he should be okay and hard to catch. So his escort of 70 horsemen go on, who, when they came to Caesarea, delivered the epistle to the governor. What's an epistle? A letter, yeah. So that letter where he was making himself look good, they delivered that to the governor, and then presented Paul also before him. Governor's, got Paul there in front of him, reads the letter, and he asked Paul, what province are you from? And when he understood, he was of Cilicia. Now, what city is that referencing to? Tarsus, right? Tarsus is in the region of Cilicia. And Felix, I don't know how broad his powers were, but apparently he understood he had jurisdiction over this individual. So when he heard he was of Cilicia, he said, I will hear thee, he said, when thine accusers are also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. So he's like, I'm not going to listen to your story until your accusers are here. We'll deal with it all at one time. And so he's going to be kept in King Herod of Antipas II, I guess. You have to look at that timeline. The guy who also had Bernice as his sister. He kept him in his judgment hall. And then our next chapter will be about 5 days later, when those leaders come down from Jerusalem and they bring their fancy talker, their orator, to Tertullus to accuse him.